I think the first question comes from 윤찬영 선생님.
Hi, I'm 찬영. I'm very honored to be with you today. Your book made big impression on me. Thank you. I will ask you a question in Korean. Sorry. 대부분의 서클이 문을 닫았다는 소식을 듣고 마음이 많이 아팠습니다. 정부 지자체의 지원이 끊기면서 운영자금 마련을 위한 양적 성장과 속도에 무게를 둘 수밖에 없었고, 그러면서 관계가 많이 소홀해졌다는 그런 평가를 하신 대목을 읽었습니다. 만약 런던 서클이 위기를 맞기 직전으로 돌아간다면 그때와는 다르게 어떤 선택을 하실지가 궁금합니다. 그리고 아울러서 다른 지역의 서클과 달리 현재 HMR 서클은 잘 운영이 되고 있는 것으로 알고 있는데 HMR 서클이 잘 운영될 수 있었던 힘은 어디에 있다고 보시는지 이것도 같이 연관지어서 대답을 해주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Thank you so much for your question. Please don't apologize. You can speak English. I can't speak any Korean. So, so this is a really good question about London Circle. What was really, and this goes to the question that Ty asked me about scaling, because this is where we really made a mistake. So in London, we had, I think, 11 circles. And what we did was, as you say, exactly as you say in your question, that in order to grow them, the money we got asked us to make some savings in the back office, as we call it in England. So they asked us to put together all in one office, the technology, the finance systems, the telephone lines that we used. And so it's incredible. Like now looking at it, I can't believe we made that mistake. But I don't know whether some of you, I mean, who work in social enterprises where there's never enough money and you're working like really long hours and sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. So we really, in a way, we lost our own part and we stepped into the wrong system, and we agreed to create this back office and put everything into the back office. And so that meant that some circles, what happened was that when we ran out of money, because two of the circles actually weren't working at all, that the whole thing collapsed. And in that moment, we weren't able, I mean, there were circles in there that were so successful, like the first circle that we had started in Southwark had been running by this stage for many years and was completely socially and economically viable. I mean, it was kind of making enough to support itself independently financially. But because we put them all into this group called London Circle, thinking that some way it would strengthen them and they could share costs, that when that didn't work because of the funding mechanism, then even the good ones collapsed, because we had to close the whole thing instead of just saying, well, these two don't work, let's have a look at why these two don't work. The whole thing fell apart. So I really made a mistake by accepting that the funding worked like that and making it all into one core. So the success, I think, in Rochdale, of the Rochdale Circle, is of course completely the opposite, that they've managed to keep that completely. It has grown, actually, it's taken in more and more neighborhoods, but all in one organization. So there isn't this kind of shared structure, and I think that's really important. But the other thing that's also really important about Rochdale Circle is something else I learned, which is that although Circle is a community organisation, it has really flourished strongly where the leaders of the state and those who are running the health systems and the care systems understand how important it is. So if you go to Rochdale and you look at a map on the wall of every service of the state, they will have Circle in there, even though it doesn't belong to them and they're not funding it, it's there, and they understand how you can refer people to one place, how you can use this Circle. In contrast, the most failing circle that we did was in a place called Suffolk, where in fact the people who started the circle, the local administration, all they really wanted was to cut costs. So they gave us money to start it, and then they didn't kind of work with us. They just sort of cut us off, and without those relationships in the system, it didn't work. So I think Rochdale is a really good example, because it has its own system. It hasn't tried to scale in that way that we did with London Circle, and also the people in Rochdale understand it in the state systems, and so they don't try to intervene, but they nurture it and they see it in their system. And one final thing I would say about Rochdale that's very interesting is that you're called cooperatives, I think, and cooperative publishing, and Rochdale is the home of the cooperative. Rochdale is a place where cooperatives were invented, and even though there's not many cooperatives now in Rochdale, there is still in the social system this idea of different kinds of the importance of different kinds of organization within the wider ecosystem, and I think that could also be why they've nurtured it for such a long time. Thank you for such a good and important question.
So next question comes from Kim Min-jung 선생님.
Hi, Dr. Cottam. I want to scream. I'm really honored to talk with you. To make my question simply, I'm currently working at Seoul Social Economy Center, and I'm in charge of community care. So my work is directly relevant with what you do. And just quick question. Like one of the things that I was impressed by your book is that in youth welfare system, we should focus on developing individuals' capability rather than manage their like problems or reliance. And I think you already mentioned about the 4 types of capabilities, but I want to could you elaborate more on what kind of environments or resources are needed in order for individuals and communities to really further develop those 4 types of capabilities you mentioned? And if time is available, I want you to elaborate more on the rich style, the circle that you mentioned about the success case. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think that one of the things is really important about capabilities is that there's no menu. Like, we don't tell people that, you know, this circle offers these 10 things, you have to do these 10 things. And I don't know how far through the book you've got, but I've got an example actually from Rochdale, which is that when we went to Rochdale, it's a very poor place. And before, just like the month before we arrived, McDonald's had closed down and McDonald's had left Rochdale because there was not enough money in Rochdale to support a McDonald's. And they were like, look, every place in the world has a McDonald's. This place is such a failure. We can't even have a McDonald's. So if you think you can come here and start a circle, you're so mistaken, because no, you know, there's nothing here. Nobody's got any money. They haven't got anything. 3 weeks later, I'm in the office in Participle, and they call from Rochdale Circle and they say, look, we've got all these people and they want to go hot air ballooning, and they're like over 60, and we don't know like how the insurance will work to take all these people up in a hot air balloon. And so sure enough, like all these people in Rochdale, where there was no money for McDonald's, had decided that they wanted to pay themselves to organize a hot air balloon trip. And I think it's like a really fundamental lesson that we don't really know what people want and what way they will kind of grow their capabilities and what opportunities they will take. So keeping the structure really flexible, so that, you know, I think the important thing about circles is it's not like there's a formal board where we ask on some older people to be formally on a board and tell us, you know, in a meeting like what they think should happen. It's like a continual process of like, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that, and through that people begin to develop. But also one of the things that I think is most important is, we've talked a bit about Rochdale, but for me the most important work I did was in another part of Manchester called Wigan. And what was really important there, because you've got an important role in the system in Seoul in care, is that in fact in Wigan they started with our family work, with a family program, and we did it in one neighborhood, which was a very poor neighborhood, and then we went to another neighborhood and we repeated the work. And then what happened was that the leaders in Wigan of the city administration, the political leader and the managerial leader, got together and they said, we're going to begin to understand what are the principles in this system that are making such a difference. And then they moved that work from families to adults. And then they began to tell their own story, and they developed this story which they called the deal. So they said to their population, we're going to do a deal with you. We're going to ask you if you can really participate in some things. So for example, they had really low recycling rates in Wigan, and it was costing them a lot of money. They said, if we could even double our recycling, we would have so much more money, and we will give that money right back to you as communities. We won't ask you to fill out forms or bid for it. We'll give it to you in 10-year amounts. We're also going to give you some of our assets. We're going to give you libraries, swimming pools. We're going to give them back to you, not because we can't afford them, but because we think they belong to you, and we're going to give you money to redo it. And so what they did there was they took the principles, and this goes again to the scaling. They didn't think about the project so much, but they thought about what are the core principles and how can we move those principles through the system. And that has been, I mean, in Wigan, when I work in Scandinavia, every year I take people to Wigan on a learning visit to go and look at their systems. I don't know how it is for you, but here in Britain, we think Scandinavia is like they have the best welfare systems in the world. And when they come from Denmark and they go to Wigan in Manchester, they cannot believe how effectively they've mainstreamed these ideas in radical health right through all their systems. And they have very different outcomes, and they have a very different, but everybody, it's a bit like beverage. If you go, everybody can tell you about the deal. They've got their version, they know what it means. And it's meant not, I think for me, what's most important is that by doing that, it means not only have they changed their formal systems, like for children in care or older people in care, but also they've changed the way people function on a neighborhood level. So people say to you, oh yeah, well, before the deal, if I saw this old lady at the bus stop with her bags, I would just drive by because I wouldn't know what to do really. But now I'm part of the deal, so I stop my car and I ask her to get in the car and I give her a lift home. So it's begun to kind of permeate society at all levels. And then of course that also helps the formal systems because you've got very different neighborhood things happening. But yeah, it's a lot to talk about. Yes, I can still fit another question if you have time, because my answers are a bit long. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, I'm so interested that these ideas have resonance in Korea, because I have the perception that your systems are so much better organized than our systems are, that I wasn't really expecting it.
No, we can relate perfectly to your assessment of the problems and everything. We really, really can resonate. The last question then comes from 이선아 선생님.
감사합니다. 저는 일하는 사람들의 협동조합 연합회에서 일하고 있는 이선아고요. 현재 복지국가 시스템을 변혁해야 된다는 주장에 깊이 공감하고 저도 거기에 동의하고요. 그다음에 관계 중심의 방안이 너무 중요하다라는 거에 저도 감명을 받았고요. 그다음에 베커 사례가 전 너무 더 궁금하고 더 깊이 알고 싶을 정도로 많은 영감을 받았습니다. 그거에 대해서 감사드리고요. 여쭤보고 싶은 거는 현재 복지 시스템에서 가장 큰 문제로 꼽히는 것 중에 하나가 홈리스 문제예요. 왜냐하면 복지 시스템에서 가장 첨예한 문제가 응집되어 있는 정책 시스템의 가장 문제 이렇게 되기 때문인데요. 뭐 주거 문제, 일자리 문제, 건강, 뭐 관계 이것들이 모두 연계가 상실한 이들이기 때문인데 그들에 대한 걸로 하나의 사례로 봤을 때 베커라는 사례로 한번 그들과 함께 관계를 가져보면 어떨까 이런 상상도 해봤는데 특히 요즘에는 코로나 때문에 아무것도 할 수 없는 상황이에요. 그래서 그렇다면 이게 좀 상상으로 연계돼서 이런 정책들을 펼 수 있을까? 내지는 현장에서 이런 사업들을 할 수 있을까? 이런 거에 대해서 의견을 좀 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 이상입니다. 감사합니다.
So this is the question here. Thank you for asking the question. And actually, I have to tell you that BACA is my favorite experiment in the book. And I am currently, my current work is around good work, and how we can form new forms of work organization in community, which might be more similar actually to your worker cooperatives. I think that the homelessness question is really critical, and perhaps it's a problem that radical help doesn't actually talk about housing, which is such a critical issue in our welfare system. I didn't work on it. But it's a real mark of our system that anybody who comes in, whether it's because they're unemployed or because they have mental health problems or whatever, is that at the root of the problems are homelessness. And of the children living in poverty here in the UK, we have thousands and thousands of families that are homeless, even though both parents are actually in work, because wages are now so low in the UK that families are homeless even though they're in work, which is really a shocking statistic for us. And I think that you might be familiar with the experiments in Finland, where what they say is it doesn't matter where you come into the welfare system, the first thing they will sort out for you is housing, because they believe is that, and they call it housing first. And no matter where you enter the system, whether you enter through work or health or schools, basically, if you don't have good housing, that is the problem that everybody focuses on. And they find that when that problem is resolved, pretty much all the other problems go away. People can sort themselves out and they can find work, or their mental health, of course, improves. And so they have this really important housing first, which I think in our country, in the UK, would be something that would be really important to tackle. I'm not sure that BACA would be, this would have to be a longer conversation, but I'm not sure BACA would be the model for homelessness, because the key thing in BACA is that in order to help people find good work, we include everybody in the community organisation. So people with good jobs, people who are between jobs, and people who have no jobs and often have been out of work for a very long time. But I'm presuming that the homeless situation, how would you, I don't know if we can ask the question back, because I'm interested, why would you want to form an organisation where people have homes with people who are homeless, rather than just sorting out the homeless problem? How would that work? I would think maybe life would be a better approach to homelessness, because what you would do is you would say, this family or this person hasn't got a home, let's see all the people who are around them right now. They probably have all kinds of interventions for other reasons. Let's ask all those people to sort the homeless problem first. That might be a better approach, but I might not have understood completely what you're asking me. Because I definitely think homelessness is the route to solving so many problems. I think you're absolutely right.
We have so many questions waiting, so many readers waiting.
Well, let's say, when I said 11 o'clock, I meant 11 o'clock UK time. So maybe we should take one more question.
Okay, just one last question, I promise.
Yeah.
배지연 선생님.
Hi, my name is Jian. I'm a PhD student studying education, specifically higher education at Penn. As a researcher in training in such an applied field, one thing that I saw so prominently is there's often a gap between people who are studying this in academia, so researchers in academia and practitioners on the ground, and how we approach, and we're all trying to solve the same issues, but there's often a language gap, there's such a gap. So I thought the models that you introduced in your book were such an interesting and innovative model in overcoming these barriers between academia and practitioners. I was curious as to your thoughts on what else universities and institutes of higher education, as well as academia, could do to facilitate and support these kind of innovative partnerships.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because this split between, on the one hand, people making the ideas, and on the other hand, people doing the practice, I think is a profound problem, because we need all kinds of knowledge to solve the complex problems of today. And we have this, and it's not just that there's a split. I mean, there's usually a hierarchy, that the people with the ideas are somehow considered to be far superior than the people with lived experience or practical knowledge. And I mean, for me, this is why 50% of my working life has been thinking about methodology, really, about how we have different methods that can bring, in the work we do, people from different fields together on an equal footing, which is very, very hard to do. Just getting everybody around the table is a start, but if you don't have a different methodology once you're around the table, then those same hierarchies matter. So maybe the academics or the politicians have more power than people who have got lived experience of using a service. But of course, that lived experience of using the service is like where all the rich ideas could really come from in order to reinvent. So this is why my work, I use a design methodology, because that gives me the sort of vehicle, the kind of language, and working visually rather than working with words gives me a really different way to kind of mix people up, because we also need lots of different academic experience as well. We need different disciplines in the same team, and that can be very, very difficult. You know, in the UK and in many parts of the world, economists have this sort of, they're the power, and then everybody else, the sort of social workers, have to kind of go second to the economists, and we need to bring everybody to the, let's not, we still need the economists, but we need the kind of social perspectives to come at the same level. So I think one of the things that is really important actually is to think about in academia, and specifically on academic courses. I teach at on the MPA at IIPP at the University College London, is I teach methods on that course, because actually if we have people who have brilliant ideas, but also have the methods and the way of connecting, and this again goes back to relationships, like how can I how can I, as a kind of leading academic practitioner or a leading policymaker, make a relationship with this family who have experienced the service and begin to work with them in a different way? And I think that can't just be done by having a good heart and wanting to talk in a different way. We need different methodological structures in which we work, and we need to have facility and confidence with different methods to begin to mix that up. And I think that's really, really important. And then the other thing that I think is really important is hiring practices within academia and also within social institutions, that unfortunately we tend to be very similar, particularly in social organizations. People come from a similar background, a similar social class, and we need to really think about how we begin to mix that up. I mean, one thing I see today is that you're almost all women, which is, like, on the one hand kind of completely fantastic, because if we were running this in London, you would be almost all men. I'm hardly ever in a room with predominantly women, which is like a beautiful thing for me today. But then, you know, I wonder why that is. I wonder, maybe that's a brilliant thing, or maybe it's in Korea, like, not enough men, the two are here valiant and they're not interested in these things. I don't know. But the thing is, to get lots of people, different people, is really, really important. I think it's a really important question.
We hope this was helpful for everyone who's here too. For those who haven't had a chance to read the book, please buy it, read it, discuss it with your colleagues, and be engaged. Let's keep in touch. Good night, dear Korean readers. And Dr. Cottam, it was good to have you here in Seoul. Now you can go back to London. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.